Hello again, this is Dr. Tanya Kafer with the next installment in a series of videos I'm doing about the research process, walking you through one entire research study. So today is the first day of data collection. I have officially finished collecting data for the first day. Now, typically data collection is something that's done by graduate assistants or research assistants. I'm doing it though because it is May and I no longer have a graduate assistant. You guys might remember from previous videos that this study got delayed for various and assorted reasons. And that means if I want this data collected this year, I got to do it myself. So that's what I'm doing. And for the first day, it went relatively well. We had pretty good response rate. If you remember correctly, we send home consent forms and information letters to parents, and then parents send back the consent form part saying if they want to sign up for the study. And we had about a response rate of about 30%, which is really good. It's usually much closer to around 20% that we get back, and I've already heard from one school that it's under 10%. So you never really know how it's going to go, but it went relatively well. 30% was a good number. If they all came back at 30%, if all the rest came back at 30%, I would be extremely happy. But mostly I'm just hoping that we'll get enough participants. As far as the study itself, the materials seemed to work fine. The kids responded really well. There were no major confusions with the kids. One of the testing illustrations is not great, but I don't have a really better option right now, so I'm going to stick with it. But if worst case scenario, we have to drop that question. Which isn't a big deal. One question out of, we have I think 30 questions in this test, and so dropping one will not be a crisis. Woohoo! We have one day done, several more days to go. Hello everyone, and welcome to another installment. This is actually not a new installment, it's a continuation of the previous installment, but I have finally finished testing all the participants. Do I look older now? Do I look more haggard? Do I look as though I have lived 10 lifetimes? Because that is what it's like testing students across 2 weeks, letting all your participants run in a 2-week period. It is exhausting. At least for me, it's exhausting. Some people find it really invigorating, but for me, it's not my favorite part of the research process. So as I mentioned, after the first day, that school had about 30% response rate, which was good. But then I'd heard back from another school that they had only had 10% or under 10%. And then the third school I went to also had under 10%. And that was all last week. So I was very nervous that we were going to be under 10% across the board. And then we started Monday, and that was a little bit better. That was around 20%. So I was like, hopefully. But at that point, I was starting to work out, what am I going to do? Because I had a hard minimum of number of students that you need to get in the study in order for this study to make any sense. Like, you need to have a certain number of people in each group. As you may remember, we're doing a between group study. That means each group has to have a certain number of people in it. For me, I mean, this is fairly arbitrary, and it's always pretty arbitrary. You want as many as you possibly can get in each one, but at some point you have to make a cutoff. And for me, the hard minimum where I basically can go ahead and analyze the data was going to be 20 participants per group, which means a total of 60 participants. And that's relatively arbitrary. Okay, so that said, I needed those 60 participants. And so at that point I was starting after the fourth day when we hadn't gotten any, we were still well under. Let me just say that. Well under. And only 2 schools left. I was really concerned. But it ended up working out. So before that, after those 4 schools, I was really starting to think, like, it's too late in the year now. We're now in mid-May. Today is May 17th. We're in mid-May. We are not going to be able to collect more students towards the end of May. EQAO starts soon. And then in June, it's basically impossible to collect data. So I would be done for this year, and I would have to try and start again in fall collecting new participants, which is a whole different kind of hassle because when you're collecting kindergarten students, as I am, there's always variability based on ages of kids, even within JK and SK. So right now they range from about 4 to 6 years old. So if we started collecting again in fall, I would be replacing my old 4 to young 6-year-old students with young 4 to early 5-year-old students. Old 4s to young 5s. And that would be sub-ideal basically I'd be extending the range of ages of my participants, which I don't really want to extend that age range. I like the age range nice and close the way it is, even though it doesn't seem like it's close since I'm collecting with JSK and SKs. It's closer than it would be if I started collecting at the beginning of the year. So I was really worried at that point, but then, thank goodness, the last two schools each had an above 50% response rate. We ended up with 89 students, so well over my arbitrary number of 20 per group and heading towards 30 per group, which 30 is really what you actually want. So that worked out well, so I'm happy about that, but I am exhausted. So for the past 6 days with a weekend in there, I have been reading the same 3 books to 89 students, so roughly 30 students per group, with the exact same intonation and the exact same phrasing, trying to keep it the exact same speed, not responding to any of their questions. And then for every student, for all 89 students, running through the exact same test, again using the exact same intonation, the exact same pacing, the exact same phrasing. It's unusual because you have to turn your brain off in a way to do it, because if you think about it, then you start putting different phrasing on things, or you start looking to see what the kid is understanding, or God forbid, when you're doing the testing, you accidentally look at the correct answer, and then that gives the kid a hint as what the correct answer is. You cannot do that. You record their responses verbatim also. You don't try and mark yes or no as you go through it. It is tiring to do, basically. You have to stay in a certain headspace for a long period of time, and staying in those headspaces can be tiring. Yeah, so that is testing participants. I wish I could show it to you, but I can't for now. So thank you.